As I said, this is committee meeting night. First one up is personnel and finance. And first we have a summative subcommittee presentation. And if you ladies could just introduce yourself so anybody in the audience that might not know you.
I'm Mrs. Gassenberg, and I'm a grade teacher at Waterford.
I'm Beverly Peterson. I'm a special education teacher at Waterford.
Sarah Shefty, and I'm the technology integrator for this.
Thank you. I assume you're working.
The three ladies that are here this evening, two of the three are part of the summative subcommittee that's been meeting for the last 2 school years. And they, based on the feedback from the committee, have put together a brief presentation for PNF tonight. What's interesting about the makeup of our presenters tonight is, as Mrs. Castigren says, she's a math teacher over at Fox River. Mrs. Peterson is actually on the subcommittee, but she's also an educator effectiveness coach. And then Mrs. Shepke has really led a lot of the educator effectiveness initiatives in the district and is kind of the head coach or queen of coaches, if you will. So in putting this presentation together, we wanted to have just a real good mix of perspectives to talk about summative evaluation tool, which the board suspended for this school year. So we'll turn it over to the ladies for their presentation tonight.
All right. So the first thing that we thought would be important to share with you is a timeline of kind of how all of this transpired. And so in 2003, the summative evaluation was implemented in our district. The summative form that you have in the packet, and we'll get to that in just a minute. And that was the evaluative tool that was used by the principals for their staff. In 2013, the summative committee began meeting to discuss concerns with that summative evaluation. So we got together, met about once a month to discuss some of the concerns that we had. In 2014, we implemented a mid-year meeting between the principals and their staff in an attempt to give more feedback based on that summative, because prior to that, we were meeting in the beginning of the year and then again at the end of the year. And we wanted more communication, more reflection time. So we, implemented the mid-year meeting. In 2014, we also piloted educator effectiveness in the district. And then this current school year, educator effectiveness became the evaluation tool in place of that summative. And as Mr. Yoke said, the board agreed to suspend the summative for 1 year. And in the place of that summative, we're doing educator effectiveness. So we are kind of hoping that we can give you information to suspend the summative permanently and go with educator effectiveness as our evaluative tool. So the facts. The summative was created to evaluate the staff, and it gave us a framework, I guess, that the administrators could go by to evaluate their staff. The merit pay component of it was added to recognize quality staff based on their summative evaluation. So depending on what score you received a merit pay bonus based on that score. Charlotte Danielson's framework for teaching provided the structure for the summative. And Charlotte Danielson's framework is research-based. So they based it on quality research. The summative was reviewed with the evaluator and educator twice a year in a face-to-face conference. Once at the beginning, this is what my plan is for the year, and then once at the end, here's how you did, here's your score, here's your merit pay. If you look in your packet, you'll see this is the summative document that we're referring to. So, the basics are up at the top, and then you'll see where the evaluation scale is. And then there are 5 categories, and you can receive up to 4 points in each category, so you would get a score out of 20. So we were evaluated based on student learning and achievement, which covers Danielson's domains 1 and 3, classroom performance, which covers domains 1, 2, and 3, culture, which is domains 2 and 4, professional learning, domains 1, 3, and 4, and then professional employment expectations, and that was domain 4. And those are the areas that we were assessed on.
Educator effectiveness, the facts on this system. system. It was designed by and for Wisconsin educators to evaluate teachers and principals through a fair, valid, reliable, and manageable process using multiple measures. We have the educator practice and then also the student outcomes. This was piloted by the state from 2011 to 2014, and it is now being implemented statewide this school year. The two components, there's formative and summative evaluations with this system. It's determined by specific goals that an educator and their evaluator are creating together. And it is also using the Framework for Teaching Instrument by Charlotte Danielson. The evaluators complete an online video-based training, assessment, and calibration, preparing them to complete fair, consistent observations for classroom practice. This we'll get into a little bit more, but it's called TeachScape, and it's an interactive program. Educators create 2 goals that relate to their specific role in the district that are tied to student growth, the SLO, and professional practice growth, the PPG. 2 goals, each created by the educator.
So the state set up a system or a cycle. This is a picture of that cycle, and basically starting in August, we began with orientation, moved into developing the educator effectiveness plan, each teacher. In that process, they're developing that SLO and PPG, which Bev talked about. September and October, working through that, putting their SLO and PPG into TeachScape. Ongoing process of observations, collecting evidence, supporting those goals. Mid-year came, that was the end of January for us, January, February. Anyone on cycle met with their evaluator, discussed their progress. Everybody in the system reevaluated their SLO, looked at data. How am I doing? How are the kids doing? Am I on track? Do I need to make adjustments? What does that look like? We are back in observation and evidence collecting. And we hit May, which is the end of the cycle, rating of our SLOs and PPGs, and then those people on cycle do a final evaluation conference again with their evaluator. So we took the state model, which you just saw, and made a document like this that basically put in all those parts, all those circles, dates, and pieces that the teachers need to meet. It's kind of like their checklist. It's kind of like our district's roadmap as to what needs to happen when. This is the framework for teaching that the educator effectiveness model follows. It's like the book you have. The book is far more detailed. The book that I shared with you at your table is the actual rubrics. So for teachers to know where they're going to fall, they use the rubrics to help guide their practice. But these are the 4 domains that are covered within the Danielson model. Under each domain, then you see the various components and rubrics tied to those as well. We tell our teachers that educator effectiveness really is 2 different buckets. So you have the teacher practices bucket, which is rated by Danielson, and it takes into account planning and preparation, classroom environment, instruction, and then professional responsibilities. The second bucket is that SLO bucket, that is the goal setting bucket where teachers are creating that goal directly tied to their students' achievement. We also tell them that it's a very evidence-based system, and evidence includes artifacts, it includes observations by their evaluator, and then the power of the conversations that they're having both with their peers and with their evaluators. Those 3 pieces then make the evidence for the system.
All right, the TeachScape system that I mentioned earlier is the evaluation management and reporting system. So it becomes an interactive online site that educators and their evaluators can communicate all the evidence, those artifacts that were mentioned in that umbrella. All that information becomes warehoused in the system. There's also a video library for professional development. The book that you have talks about the different, it gives a rubric, it gives the different areas and the different levels of each domain. But this site goes a little further. It goes through, it pinpoints exactly what's different in each of the levels. It also gives, like I said, the video library. You can go on and watch the 2 non-observable domains. You can go on, or yeah, the 2 that are observable. You can go and watch a video of what each level is expected. When you go into the system, this is what it looks like. You have your teacher self-review. There's a lot of self-reflection in this process, and that became a very important part of it. So you go in and you review at the beginning of the year, you self-reflect, and through that self-reflection, you create a goal, your student data, and then your self-reflect, your personal growth that you would like to achieve that year. And that becomes your SLO and your BPG. And you go through this at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, and then again at the end of the year with your data. And this just gives an example of the teacher side of it, what reflection you would go through during this process. So you have your baseline data. This is where you're putting that information. Where are my students at? Where am I at? And where do I want to go? You're having that constant reflection. You put information about your time interval, your targeted growth, and then evidence. And then you go through all that process, and then you write your SLO. And then here it mentions in the middle there the mid-interval review. So that's after you had all this reflection, you then at the middle of in January have a review and determine where your progress is at.
So now that we've given you the facts about the two evaluative tools, we thought we would give you some rationale to support using educator effectiveness as our evaluative process. First of all, it's objective. Because there are very specific rubrics, it's pretty cut and dry. It's pretty black and white. If you look at the previous summative, the domains, there were several domains in each category, and there were not rubrics to guide the principals, the administration as to how to rate a teacher based on those. The evaluators are also very well trained in educator effectiveness. As Bev said earlier, they actually have training sessions, they're calibrated, and then they need to go back and recalibrate to make sure that they're all consistently using the rubrics the way they're supposed to be. It is a computerized system to communicate data between educator and evaluator. So unlike the summative, where you basically, it's what the principal could observe and your data, you as a teacher can put in evidence yourself. You can put in your artifacts, you can put in information, and that allows you to have a little bit more, an opportunity to show your administration what you can do when they're not in the classroom observing you, because there's other evidence you can put in. It is a systematic process and procedure, and we in our district have really laid it out very clearly. This is exactly what's expected, this is when it's due, and we have training sessions available to help us. Sarah does an excellent job of coming in and educating everyone on when, what, how, why everything needs to happen. It has statewide implementation and support, and as Bev said, there are videos, there are rubrics, there are emails that we can send to get information, you can call places to get information, so there's training sessions, you can have your questions answered. The evaluations are more purposeful and specific because we know exactly what is being observed, what the expectation is. We know, I guess, when you know what the expectation is, it's easier to plan for that. Accountability for off-cycle teachers as well. So whether you're on cycle or off cycle, there are specific things that you're responsible for, and we feel that kind of keeps everybody on their toes. It is a reflective model to promote growth for educators and students. It's not a one shot at the end of the year, here's how you did, and now we have a summer off and changes are going to be made over the summer. Now it's reflective constantly. We're constantly able to go in and look at our data, reflect on it, see if there are things that need to be changed. You can have your peers help you with reflection. You can have your administration help. So it's a very reflective model, which is how educators grow, by reflecting on what they're doing.
All right, continuing our rationale to support EE as our evaluation process, I'm going to talk just a little bit more about the summative. A lot of this was covered at the beginning, but just kind of going through after we've gone over EE a little bit more. The summative process was subjective and inconsistent. There was room for interpretation by individuals. In the process, it became middle of the year. Well, first of all, just the summative at the end of the year, the first couple of years, where you just kind of got a score based on whatever your evaluator had seen that year. And then it turned into having the mid-year, so at least you had a mid-year check, kind of the formative part, and then summative at the end of the year. And it just caused a lot of problems with our staff as far as feeling like their voice wasn't being heard. Maybe the evaluator didn't see something that they were doing that would have promoted a stronger growth in one area. The domains of the summative document, they were vague and not clearly defined. As stated, the domains in those 5 categories, it might have been domain 2 and 3 lumped together, 1, 2, and 3 in some areas, or 3 and 4. So it became unclear on what specifically an educator needed to change for that area. And the summative process didn't promote that reflection, improvement, learning, or growth, because it was the end of the year. It was a summative, so you got that one shot. Here's at the end of the year how things went, and then you go into the summer and you have a whole new group of students and whole new situation. The intention of correlating summative and merit pay was meant to be a positive. However, it became negative and competitive. The inconsistencies and people who didn't have certain responsibilities tied to the summative were impacted in some areas, and it became very negative in the climate. And summative relied heavily on map testing for teachers who did have MAPS testing without using a baseline. So everyone was expected to hit the same percentage, or their score wasn't allowed to be a certain number. And with the educator effectiveness, you're looking at your data. You're looking at your data at the beginning of the year. You're getting a baseline and determining where you can grow from that number.
So as we stated earlier, we know that the purpose of the merit pay initially was to recognize the quality staff that we have in the district. It was meant to be a positive, and we all understand that. But we thought if you're looking for ways to recognize the staff, we would maybe come up with some ideas that might give you some suggestions as opposed to merit pay. So a couple of the things that we came up with was, first of all, newspaper involvement, a little bit more on the positive side as opposed to the negative side, where we're trying to document more. I know that the newspaper doesn't necessarily come into our schools very often, but we might want to initiate a little bit more of highlighting the great things that we're doing in our buildings in the paper. We thought about maybe doing a recognition dinner. We want to keep staff, the quality staff in our district. So doing a recognition dinner for anyone who's served 20 years in our district or more. So at the end of the year, you made it 20 years here, let's all go out to dinner at the Cotton Exchange or somewhere else and recognize those quality staff, because we're not getting that longevity, I guess, and we would like to recognize the people that are here and encourage others to stay. Gift cards for recognition, just small, nothing large, $5 Java Joe's or something like that. If you worked on a committee for 2 years or something like that. We would like to do full district activities. We kind of feel isolated in our buildings because we don't have an opportunity to do a lot together. So we had talked about, let's do a brewer game or something where the entire district goes and we get an opportunity to be social as a whole staff instead of at an in-service where, you have a school-related thing that you have to be responsible for and you don't get a chance to just relax and get to know the people you spend the majority of your time with. More time to build relationships, kind of along that line. Add recognition to the district newsletter. I'm sad to say that I've never read our district newsletter. That's terrible, I know. But it's there and I don't go to that. If it was emailed to me, perhaps I would take the initiative more. And with that being said, maybe we say, okay, the month of September, we're going to highlight kindergarten teachers and middle school science teachers, and we're going to put pictures of them and give a little bio about them and talk about them or some of the great things they're doing, and then email that to all the families so they know what's going on in the district. And then in the next month, we highlight a different group of people. We also talked about that featured department would get some sort of a gift, even if it's a pen or something, just to show that, we know that you're doing great things. Here's what we're recognizing that. And then we also talked about recognition, like some sort of a century club for those teachers that are earning 100 points or more in a year. As you know, we have the point system where, every committee, every extra thing that you're doing, you earn points for. But we know we have a lot of staff doing well more than the requirement, 50, 40 points. And why not recognizing those staff? Because they know they don't need those points, but they're still going above and beyond to do those great things. So you're a member of the Century Club. Doesn't mean you're old. It means you're involved and you're doing the great things that we need in this district. So just a few things that we thought might put a more positive spin, because we know that's what merit pay was intended to do, but we thought maybe there were some other ways we could do that besides that merit pay. Any questions?
Well, first let me say thank you again for coming to you. I just let the board know, I think I told you before, we had a brief review of this, about that before we did, just make sure we want to bring it as it is right now. I said it looks great. I think it hits all the key points on there. And I think one major point on that is, and you said it, is the original merit pay, the original summative evaluation process. First of all, summative was way out in front of other districts because nobody had a educator effectiveness. And now that there is educator effectiveness, that, took us at least to key us in to say, let's look at what we've got and how to modify it. But the other major important thing was the merit pay was originally a positive reinforcement aspect, or at least thought to be, and obviously in hindsight may not have worked out to what we thought it would be as far as a positive reinforcement. And since then we've modified it, and we've got our revised pay structure with a point system built into it, and some of that merit pay rolled into there. So both of that will work out well. But again, thank you very much for bringing this forward. It's good to see something documented down. But with that being said, I'll open it up if anybody's got any questions.
I think you did a great job of laying out the two different evaluation processes and strengths and weaknesses of them, and I appreciate that time, and thank you to the other committee members who aren't here. I don't have any questions regarding it. I'm familiar with educator effectiveness, and I think that it makes a lot of sense with where we're at right now, also with the salary schedule. I think, again, the points that you're earning, I think it fits right in with that, and I think the point that it provides you more feedback, and it's tied more to student data and growth, I think is probably very important to that, which may have been discussed.
I'd have to agree with Dawn. I think there's no reason to duplicate the process, especially if something, to me, to have something that's in place that other districts use, we have new teachers coming in, it's something they're familiar with. It's not something that has to be learned. Becoming a teacher at Waterford, okay, now you have to learn a new way to tie your shoes. It's the same way, in most other districts. I have to imagine this year was positive in moving to just using the educator's effectiveness and going away from the summative process.
I think it was very positive. I think the other thing that we've all learned is a lot about the process, and so I know even looking forward to next year, I'm excited about that because we've learned so much now to make next year even be better.
Great. Yeah, I agree with everybody else. And also, thank you very much. I know this was, I'm sure, a ton of work, and we appreciate it.
I guess I was just going to ask you, a big piece of this is the reflection process. Do you feel that that's beneficial that's in there? I'm going through it myself, but I just like to hear what other people say. There is a huge, you have to stop several times throughout that. It's a lot of work. It's not, the other one was easier. You evaluate one time a year, this is a lot of work, but you feel it's beneficial?
I think it's quality work.
Okay.
I don't mind spending the time doing it if it's actually benefiting my students, whereas before, in all honesty, I got this for at the end of the year, and then summer came, and I was exhausted. So you don't think about it as much, but now I'm constantly having to reflect and reevaluate, and oh man, I need to do something different here, or even just looking at our SLO document and seeing how things need to be tweaked based on, our evidence, amping it up a little bit, or changing things. So I think it's time well spent.
I think too, an important component with the educator effectiveness is the baseline data. So you're looking at your data and then making an appropriate goal instead of everybody having the same goal. You're looking at where your students are at, where your strengths are, what you're going to do to improve that, and keep reflecting on it.
Yeah, we had this discussion before. One issue will be is I still don't think educator effectiveness, as it sits right now, is the best method for determining if you have a situation, if you are decreasing in staff. It's a good method right now for reviewing the teaching staff based on the SLO, but it may not give you the best insight to something that is subjective on a teaching basis. Because you may have, in this case, it doesn't affect us in some situations, other ones it will. If you have specialized area, math or something, a subjective indication might be something that is really in play, whether you keep one staff member or another if you're reducing in that area. So this may need to be tweaked a little bit for our district to get some more of what we had in the summative evaluation process in there. But the other issue is educator effectiveness still as a statewide initiative is not being accepted by everybody. I can tell you the district right next door has already got a resolution out there stating they're against educator effectiveness. And the main reason is the amount of hours it takes out of the school, because this doesn't actually, in essence, This is not helping the students with that 100% of time. A lot of that time is used up by reviewing teaching staff. Now, if we already know that we're a highly qualified district, which we are in a lot of our circumstances, having educator effectiveness tell us we're a highly qualified district doesn't help us. We wasted a lot of hours, which we could have done other in-service things that would have been beneficial to our staff, technology or reading or some other thing. But right now, if we use it all up, and we have a lot of time this year and previous with trying to ramp up educator effectiveness. So hopefully that comes down and taking up all of our extra time. But as it's right now, I think they're going to be needing in the future to at least look at it and see if it has everything they need in there. So right now, I think it's a good way to go, and I don't think, I think putting the summative evaluation process out to pasture completely is the best way to go right now. So I would be in favor of going with this process here and sticking with it right now and seeing if it has the outcome we need over the next couple of years.
I would agree. What would our next step be with that?
I think we just have to make a resolution to kill off some of the evaluation process system for that to get effective.
Basically, the committee would have to bring it to the board, so there would be a motion and a second from the committee.
Just to go forward with this as the educator effectiveness is their only review process, which will push forward to the board.
Okay. Thank you.
Again, thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies, great job.
Thank you very much.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the RFP review for the 4K wraparound care on site. I just want to bring us to a little history of why we're here discussing this today. When we talked about the registration, we had 74 students registered, and during that time, we began to talk about whether or not we should have some on-site availability for childcare. And so in the registration process, we did ask people if they were interested. We had all of the other materials out there too, and a small amount of people did ask for on-site. Evergreen, 8 students at this time. Woodfield, 13, and Trailside, 4. So 28 students out of the 74. So therefore, we talked a little bit about the rec department wanted to do the wraparound, and they came and did a presentation, and then we decided to go to an RFP. So as a result of that, we received 4 wonderful letters from It's About Kids, Rainbow Preschool, Homestead Daycare, and Today's Child, asking that, and you received the letters as school board members, so with the last line saying, with this being said, rather than offering on-site wraparound child care at the elementary schools, we're suggesting that the Waterford Graded School District allow the local child care centers to offer families the wraparound care options at our existing sites. So as a result, we have only 2 RFPs. We have one from the Waterford Rec Department and one from Today's Child, and you received that in your board packet over the weekend. I think the discussion and decision needs to be made about whether or not you as a board only want to, how you're going to respond to the, quite frankly, to the parents who ask for on-site care, to vendors who are interested in offering that care, and of course the child care centers who prefer that we don't offer those services. The only difference, a few slight differences between the 2 RFPs that I see. Both of them are really well written and really show concern for the children and the services that they would bring. I'd be, happy to have either of them on site. And the only difference is that the Waterford Rec Department is willing to transport. And if you look at the 4 students from Trailside could be put together with the 8 students from Evergreen to have about 12 children. And then the Woodfield site could have 13. So there's several options that you have to think about. No on-site childcare, or offer both of the RFPs an option to be in charge of one of the on-site locations, but those are decisions that you would get to make as a Board of Education. Do you have any questions for me regarding that? regarding the RFPs or anything about the numbers or anything?
No questions, anybody statements?
I guess when we started the 4K discussions and moving forward, I was definitely in favor of partnering with the community agencies. And I understand that registration has impacted where families have chosen to go. But I would like us to discuss partnering with the community agencies for the wraparound care, and even just to have a discussion regarding what it would look like if we did do the care at the sites. Some families may not be interested in the wraparound care. It would be at the It's All About Kids or Homestead Daycare. They may want it on site at the school for reasons of pick up or drop off with siblings. But I think I'd like to have that discussion.
Well, I'll tell you this, as you know from the onset, I am not in favor of a 4K for the aged children. I think 4K, 4-year-olds running around are a lot, there's a lot more issues that can arise. The only reason I would vote for 4K was for the financial aspect of the district, being that we're a declining district. If we were not a declining district, I would vote for 4K. But I'll tell you this, I am not in favor of 4-year-olds being on site for long-term wraparound care. We don't have a long-term wraparound care we don't have half-day kindergarten right now, right? If we had half-day kindergarten, it'd be hard to argue against having half-day wraparound 4K along with half-day wraparound 5K, but since we don't have half-day wraparound 5K, I can't agree with half-day wraparound 4K. And I think if you take more business away from those local businesses, put it under the name Waterford Rec Department, it's nothing to do with recreation. But I don't believe that the public sector should be competing with those private businesses who you're killing off their livelihood as it is the 4-year-olds. Because we don't have enough kids on the outside, as it looks like right now, if you go to 4K on site, they're going to have to be in the school district. But yet to be determined, but as far as I can see, that's what it's looking. So if you take now again the 4-year-olds away from the ability for the outside services to provide daycare for them for at least a half a day, now they're down to 3-year-olds or less. At some point, they're going to start closing their doors. It's just not the adventure they want to be in. So now you're going to have the 4-year-old parents very happy. You've taken 4K into here and everything. But then all of a sudden, you're going to have to take care of the 3, the 2s, and the 1s, and the 0s because nobody else will be out there available to do it. I'm not in agreement that the local school district should be offering an on-site wraparound through the rec department program in direct competition with people that are actually paying taxes in the district and have facilities and they're paying their property taxes and everything else. So I'd be in favor of coming up with some plan where the wraparound care is off-site. Now, again, I'm 1 person out of 5, but that's my opinion right now.
And my other concern with going with Waterford Rec would be that we'd be opening it up to all 4-year-olds because of funding. And so the purpose of it is to provide all-day care for those who are in 4K.
Exactly.
And so I wondered in my mind about, what would be, the schools were on the sign-up, the daycares were slotted to those certain school boundaries. And so wondering about busing to those agencies, It's All About Kids, Homestead, and Today's Child for that care. And if we're busing to homes, it'd be a stop within that boundary area regarding that.
Yeah, I don't think it's not a bad idea. It's a question we should discuss. I think that the busing is probably a smaller aspect of it and getting them somewhere safely is more important.
But I'd like to see us partner with those community agencies because my personal goal is not to have them close their doors.
Right.
As you said, we want to provide something for our students, but also if we can partner with them, it can be a benefit to both.
I agree with you 100%. So what would you like to know, Kathy?
I'm not sure if you've answered the question of whether or not we're going to have on-site wraparound care.
I think that was a no.
Okay? Then
I think we would much rather support community agencies that have been there taking care of children and have a very good insight on how to interact with 4-year-olds than bring them on site. And now this can be reviewed in the future. But right now, we have less capability on site for 4-year-olds. We do have a little bit of interaction with our title funding program. but right now we don't have wraparound care on site for those 4-year-olds, correct?
Correct.
So there's a lot of other needs. The smaller you get, the more needs there are.
And I think it's been stated by many of us and by different districts and by those in the community agencies that hopefully our first year may be smaller, but then we'll grow and we will likely need them at that time. And I
Correct.
would hate to see that a decision we make now changes the future for all of us.
Yeah, because we start reducing it now, and some close their doors, well, it makes it even harder.
Right.
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 So that'll be something that you'll bring forward on the 16th to vote on. Okay,
Okay.
great.
Any questions from any of the people from the agencies? Feel free.
Really sorry. It's just-
No, no problem.
Come on up.
I wasn't sure. I'm gonna come up to the mic. I'm sorry. I just want to thank you guys very much for, your open minds and really thinking this over so thoroughly. I did prepare a presentation for you, but I think it's kind of a given. I think I've made my say. I was wondering though, with all of this and doing the wraparound care on sites, which I'm just so ecstatic about, so thank you. Would it be then that for like Evergreen, I kind of had something in my proposal based on Evergreen, because Evergreen doesn't have a site that is within the busing route. So my thought was, and this is just my idea, our suggestion would be to have the children at Evergreen, if they don't want to have their children bused, or any of the children don't want to have, any of the families don't want their children to be bused, for them to use the 4K that's on site if we do that partnering. I think that in the very beginning, when it was decided that we had to fill up the schools first, which I completely understand from a standpoint of financial means, that's, ultimately would be the best scenario. But I think in doing that, then you're kind of cutting out those families that don't want the busing. So by partnering with myself and Rainbow Preschool, you can minimize that busing cost by doing that. I think I kind of mentioned that before. But in doing that, then you can also give that option for parents as well who don't want the busing. And that would actually decrease the busing for the school as well. So it's kind of a win-win that way. Granted, I may not have 17 the first year, but I think we all kind of were surprised by the first enrollment. I kind of was. And I did kind of talk to a couple of my parents. I think there may have been some confusion with the parents on the registration forms, because I did make contact with a few of my parents at the parent-teacher conferences we just held at our center. And I did find a couple parents that said they signed up with me. So there might have been some confusion on what they were supposed to do on the form or something along those lines. So I think there is a little bit of discrepancy in some of that. I just kind of wanted to kind of make us aware of that too. So there's just a lot. I think it's also a learning curve this year. I think it's all, I think this is just one of those small bumps we're going to maybe face on the way. But just kind of wanted to let you know kind of what my thoughts were, and then, I can kind of hash those things out. But I was kind of under the impression today that we were out kind of maybe talking about some of those concerns and everything else. And I know Tom had kind of said, well, I'll be out here and kind of talking about things. So I just kind of wanted to know, is there open discussion for that? Would we be able to kind of meet more in an informal setting where we can kind of go over some of these things and some of our concerns as partners? And also, there was one other issue that I wanted to bring up, and it's in my PowerPoint. So
Well, I tell you what,
I'm trying to remember it.
Should we schedule a meeting specifically to talk about it?
I think
I'm
that
more than happy to do that.
curriculum was my concern, because with the learning, knowing how young minds learn, I think it would be really helpful if we would be able to kind of have a little bit of input as far as to the curriculum. I don't know if that had been discussed or had been determined yet. But I thought, because we had kind of looked at a couple of them, and a couple of them that we looked at really aren't tailored to be flexible with the kids as far as where they are academically. Because if you really push some of those 4-year-olds a little too far, a little too fast, they'll shut down. And we just don't want to do that to them at this young stage and kind of getting frustrated with school. So it's just kind of something I was kind of thinking about as well. So yeah, I think definitely if we could get together and kind of just go over things and kind of discuss concerns or anything, and see from me, if you guys have questions for me, about what we do, how we implement things.
As to the sign-up process, and correct me if I'm wrong, if the sign-up process was strictly, what school are you going to be going to, what would be your next choice, and then your third choice, I think was that.
Right, they were given 3 choices, so there were different people, of course, that picked different things for each choice.
Right.
And I guess the discussion would have to be at the board level of, are we going to offer all the parents, as they come back for screening, this was your first choice, this is what we're offering you, and then ask them to confirm that with the new knowledge of not having any wraparound, because they may want to make a change at that time. But I would promote that we give back to the parents all their first choice when possible, but we'll be looking at the enrollment after the next registration, which is March 25th. We were going to come back and talk about where the enrollment was at each of the locations, as well as the possible partner sites, and whether or not we were going to be partnering with them. So I think that would be a good time for that.
Right, and I think a lot of that was based on the action of the board saying that we need to fill a certain number of spots in the district to make it viable in the district. Then it would go outside providers. So I think what needs to be done is you need to go back now and say, based on the current numbers and projected, here's what the anticipated location of your 4-year-old will be, if it be on Green or Trailside or wherever. And so they know that if their first choice was an outside provider, they may not be receiving that. And then they need to make a determination, are they still going to have their 4-year-old enrolled in the school if that wasn't their first choice, was their second? Maybe they choose not to.
Well, we can give them all their first choice, except for if there was only one person at a site, we can give them their first choice, but it still might be that some of those parents want to change if there's not wraparound care. So that there still might be some people that are changing their minds, but offer them their first site, their first choice, when there's a potential program at that
It's
place.
not having that wraparound care as a parent. If I thought my child would be able to be at Evergreen and then have wraparound care at the school, but now I know if I want to need wraparound care, they're going to go to today's child. I may want to be there to start, so that they don't have to have that transition.
Right, so that'll allow for some
Right?
Yeah.
juggling before the end of the school year, and the screening is in May, so I think that's.
Yeah, and we have to have a little more discussion on what to do with Evergreen, and you're correct, Evergreen is an issue because Evergreen as an order does not have a provider in it, nor, well, I think it will in the future because there's just nothing viable for a site right now as far as commercial real estate. Maybe that'll change once this ever gets 100 years from now, developed on that corner, right?
And that's part of the reason why the whole discussion began, so.
Right. So, I mean, we are where we are right now, but I would say we need to have a discussion on this.
After March 25th.
That's what I'm thinking.
Maybe we have the April committee.
So, yes.
April committee.
And let's make sure we set aside some time, because I think we had this conversation at just about every meeting, and I feel like we're just torturing these poor people with not moving forward on what we're gonna do. It seems to, vacillate every time, and, I'm equally as part of that, but I think we need to set aside a block of time that we can really talk about this and get some answers and give people direction and pick a way forward, because it's getting.
Yeah, well, I think we pretty much said, there's no vacillation around it.
Yeah, I think today you made a very important decision, and
Yeah,
it took a
on
while
the
to make,
one
but you looked at all
Talking
the.
about the rest.
Yeah, well, I think you need, a couple things you need to do that would come back to us and let us know some data on this, which is if you could contact the existing sign-up folks and let them know that based on their projections to fill our classes in the school district, this is what the outcome of where they were going will be.
So you want a letter out to them before?
What you think?
I
I
guess
was-
I'd wait till that second registration.
Yeah, second
just
regist-
because that might change the dynamics of that.
I can see that after spring break coming
Right.
out, because then we'll be
Yeah.
reminding them about the screening, and then if they have questions, they can begin to do some more investigation, or come in and ask questions at the screening, or call, we can give them the different sites and things, and I
Yeah.
think even from this meeting, it will go out that, the wraparound isn't gonna be there, so parents will start to wonder and probably call.
Okay.
I can see a big question being when this comes up, if I were a parent, and I were considering the wraparound care, I probably would ask about transportation. What can I expect? What are going to be my options? Am I going to pick them up and take them to the daycare? Is there going to be busing? Will I go to the daycare? are there anything we want to decide now or talk about in regards to that, that when that registration comes up, we can say to them?
Well, what we've been saying at the registration, well, what I've been saying is what you've already decided upon, which is that children can be bused anywhere in their elementary physical boundary. So that's exactly what we shared to every parent who came for registration.
Right, and I know that's what we talked about to this point, but we just discussed that Evergreen may be a problem in that situation because it doesn't have any daycares close enough. So are we gonna reevaluate that with the?
I would say you couldn't reevaluate that until after the next registration, and then we agree on, you would decide on the partnership sites.
But I definitely am open to that reconsideration because I do think Evergreen kids need wraparound care. I don't want to miss out on them coming to 4K.
All right.
So
Absolutely.
I guess it's also, it may also drive some of the kids to those locations if they know that, let's say we decide we're gonna have a bus that picks up kids from each school and takes them to the daycare centers, or however we work it, may open up options for Evergreen kids to go to some of the different daycares that aren't within the specific boundaries.
The other question I would have too is, and we can answer this before next month, which is based on our projected numbers in each of the school districts and the kids being bused, how many students would be in a bus, being that we're only busing the 4K or K4 students at that time.
Well, remember when Rob Nelson came from the bus company, and then we have the projections of what students are going to be in the AM, what are going to be in the PM. That would be in the same letter that would go out in April, and so when they came back for screening, we need to find out from each of those parents, A, is the option that we're giving you still good? B, even if you're going to Trailside, do you want to bring your own child there and back? So we won't know how many kids are going to be on the bus until we work through that process of sending those letters out and having those conversations with parents.
Okay. All right, so then we'll put it in a committee meeting for next month.
Coming back about registration numbers and what about partnership sites? What are we going to do about that? Rainbow currently has 8 students, and Today's Child has 1 student for choice 1.
For choices.
So I'll bring that
So based
information
on
back to you.
Next enrollment date, it may change,
Right.
and based on current projected numbers of the 8 and 1, right now are we satisfied with the number of students in the district to achieve at least that 1 position at each one of the schools?
Not yet at Trailside.
Okay,
Okay.
so right now,
But it may
Trailside
also-
hit that though.
Right, and it may also be that people listening to this are going to call and change some of their
Right.
thoughts if they don't want their child on a bus or if they wanted all-day services. So I imagine things will be different, but we'll bring it back to you in the committee and we can
Okay,
try to have those finalized conversations in April.
all right.
About the choices for wraparound, not wraparound, but choices for partnership sites, because we can't send the letters out in April until you decide on the partner sites. So it's like a dominoes, and we're
Yes.
headed down the dominoes path. The wraparound has taken a lot of time, but now we'll be able to move forward a little bit swifter.
And as far as your question on curriculum, could you forward any questions or concerns to Kathy and discuss it with her? I'm assuming that the curriculum we're going to be following is pretty much a statewide curriculum. and-
Well, we'll be discussing it because we have a meeting with all of the early learning partners. Jen Baloo will be sending out that agenda if she hasn't already for March 27th so that we can update, because March 25th is the 4K registration. March 27th we'll update the partnership sites, and we had planned on showing them the curriculum that we had early childhood in, kindergarten teachers, reading teachers, as well as what fits with the rest of the scope and sequence.
Okay. All right. But any questions you do have, you give to Kathy, so at least they're in the queue if something comes up on that ahead of time.
Yeah, we're gonna have the curriculum there so we can look at it and play with it. Heavy into social and emotional needs, that's why we chose it. And heavy into early learning, oral language and pictures and lots of fun things.
Okay, great.
The other thing would be also the daycare that's going to take care of everything. We have to be busing.
Right.
Pardon me?
You have to also look at what daycare you're gonna partner with for Evergreen, since there's none in our district, and that should be brought to the next committee meeting.
Yes, I'm not sure if that will be something that will be figured out after we find out from the parents who has moved or has questions.
All right, moving on then. Summer program stipends.
Well, I happen to have that too. You have a sheet that I handed out from tonight. 2 sheets, one color-coded and one regular. Just thinking back to, I guess if we look at the top of the sheet, the question is, does the Board of Education in Waterford Grady School District want to offer continued intervention for students receiving such services during the spring of 2015 and identify the needing the services into the 15-16 school year? So that is ultimately the question that is on the table. And if so, are you willing to spend grant money on such an endeavor? Last year, we used some of the Title I funds at Trailside and for those services for reading and math because they are a Title I building. And then would you be willing, that's the bigger question, if you answer yes to the first question, would you be willing to utilize money from the general fund to provide face-to-face and/or online coaching to meet such needs? Judy Ketterhagen last year did some online coaching with Compass. She was given so many hours that she could be online. She provided feedback to the students, sometimes the parents, and some very small tokens. The majority of the parents were very pleased. Some would have liked more tokens, but of course we had to be within budget of how many tokens versus how much time for the teacher. And then Jennifer Lindner did some math online coaching, and Sandy Finnegan did some online reading and Lexia for Title I students. And then Title I students and teachers can be paid out of the Title I grant if there's funds, which there is. And those can be used over the course of, the funds for this year can be used over the course of the summer yet. And so Mary really helped me out there with that. And then Andy Meineke did some, we had a pilot with iLearn, and they let us hold the pilot over the summer. And so we were able to use a free iLearn pilot to do some coaching for students who are coming into the middle school below level in math, and then some also that continued into the 7th grade. So the question is, how much would this cost you? And from my guesstimates, not to exceed more than $8,000, depending upon if teachers and students are interested in more face-to-face, which would be an hourly rate, or online would be more of a stipend. So that is a question, but I really, I mean, we could do it for all kids interested, but I'm really focusing on the students. Not that it's not good for all students, but really focusing on the students that either if they're below level, and if you're below level and you don't keep on something continued through the months of the school year, it's easy to lose too much. So
That's my question. What did our data show for the students who participated last year?
I think because we were starting the program, we had small numbers in the Compass area. It wasn't targeted and selected students, so it wasn't really intervention needs students. It was any students. So it's hard to say. I mean, there was good growth, but it was hard to say because they weren't at-risk students. But as far as the title students, there weren't a lot of title students who were interested in that. But the ones that did a pretty good job on that. Not in growing mostly, but maintaining. So typically the research would say if you're going to make really strong intervention growth, meaning that you're going to raise your level, your grade level achievement, you need to be, on something 3 or 4 hours a week, every week for the summer. So unless you're doing some really intense work, that usually doesn't happen, but to maintain is huge because some of our at-risk kids can lose a whole semester in a summer.
This wouldn't take away Compass from any student.
No, because any student any current student in the 14-15 school year has access to Compass until we regroup it for the new school year in mid-August. So they can always use it themselves, it's whether or not they need some motivation. Some parents like to have somebody else motivating their kids, and I can understand that.
Okay, John. I'm in favor of anything that will bring about more learning or output for the students. We want to maintain our high rating as a district as far as educational outcome. So what I would say is I'm in favor of it, but I would say 2 years from now it needs a review to see with real hard data what was attained. Right now it sounds kind of wishy-washy as to how many students and what was gained and or held.
The Title I data, because we have to really hold strong to keeping that for the grant, shows a nice growth, but like we said, because the compass was offered to everyone, so that data wouldn't be as tight to see if that students have been maintained, but we certainly could do that.
I'm also fine with it, just I agree watching the data to make sure that we're getting our money's worth and participation also, and wonder, I know with Title I sometimes you have to do like a family component to it, and so wonder if there's some spring piece about looking into summer or some education on the tool, having the parents explore them, help support them more too.
And when they're doing it online, the teachers are talking to the parents too. Because some of the programs you can send emails directly to the students, and other ones you can send them to the parents. So mostly they communicated on a bi-weekly basis, but of course some teachers did more than that.
But even to get the parents fired up about their participation before somebody even starts.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Well, what we did last year, and we would do more so targeted letters. Last year I sent letters to all of the Title I students, finding out if they wanted to continue on, and every one of the title teachers followed up with the parents to find out. Still, I mean, it's a little bit trickier of a thing to get some parents to do, so, but we'll continue to do that. But this year I already have the component of Compass for those buildings that are not Title I, and directly send something to those parents to find out if they're interested.
Anybody else, any questions?
And like I said, one thing, the 8,000 you think not to exceed, but just, that's what you feel the growth will be in targeting all the schools that,
You know,
or what
that's
you hope it to be.
that, you know, we'll see what it is. I don't anticipate using that much, but I didn't want to have to come back
Sure.
every time.
The other thing too is if it's an issue, is it something we could go to the PTO and ask them if they want to fund part of this? I mean, if it's for individual schools, possibly we could do that.
Yes, the only tricky part I would see is that this is for interventions, so it's specific to students.
Yeah.
It's not open to all students, so a
Right.
PTO may not want to fund something that's not for all students.
That's fine. All right, move forward with that.
just to add the point of bringing back data to them.
Yes.
You know,
And you're gonna have the 8,000 in there then too?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, should we move forward then, monthly budget check ledger review? Check ledger book.
I came in and reviewed the checks, and didn't have any
Nothing missing?
questions. Nothing missing. And no surprises.
We say that flippantly, folks, but just recognize we have a computer system now that checks everything and has double redundancy on it, so there's really, it'd be extreme occasion that something would be out of place in our check ledger, so. It's more so for the board members to look check ledgers over to see outstanding sizes or amounts and what they're going towards that may pique somebody's curiosity to have a question on something, so. That being said, everything looks okay on the check ledger. Let's go on to the monthly budget. Let's say you, Chris.
I'm really pleased with the expenditures. We've expended 45%. Of course, we're well into 60% of the school year by now. And last year, at this time, we were at 54% expenditure, so we're doing very well. And the revenues are almost right on target as to where they should be.
Okay, great. So financially, we're looking real well. We may wind up with an under expenditure and something we can move over to our fund balance, which will help with our reduction from the state aid next year, which will help offset some of that. So should be good. on to maintenance projects.
The last piece for this committee this evening is, it's been in front of buildings and grounds for sure. I think it was brought up in the rec committee at one point. And actually, I was thinking about this the other day. The very first night that I was actually going to be here in Waterford grading, this topic of the evergreen gym floor was actually brought up, and the superintendent at the time was going back and forth with board members at the time whether or not to do it because the money was there and so on and so forth. So the point is that when we put the budget together for this current fiscal year, we had put over $80,000 in the budget to refurbish Trailside's gym floor and Whitfield's gym floor. That gym floor company came in the week of convention, school board convention up in January, and said that we've got about 5 years left on both those floors, are both in decent shape. So while that company was in, Mr. Quant also got a bid on doing the evergreen gym floor, replacing that evergreen gym floor. That bid came in at $58,400. There are only 2 vendors that do that kind of flooring, and he's reached out to that vendor and has not heard back. And that vendor is located out of state, so the last time that he explained to me he had received a quote from that vendor to redo the Fox River floor was substantially more than the regular vendor that you have a quote from because of all the travel expenses and material and transportation costs that are built into that. So tying into the budget, we're doing very, very well health-wise. And then we've had this dangling out there for several years as far as replacing the evergreen gym floor. And I know it's on Mr. Maltoff's wish list for several years, advocating for that too. So that was the main thing. There will be a buildings and grounds meeting in April then with some other project costs, the parking lots and those types of things. But I wanted to get this in front of you tonight for recommendation, one way or the other, to go to the board next week, so we can get it on their calendar and get it done this fiscal year. So it's up for discussion.
Yeah, my only sentiment on this is, I've been saying all along, I'm not in favor of replacing that floor, but I'll say this, I also wouldn't have been in favor of putting that in the budget. I didn't know that was in there for the maintenance projects. In that, I would think we would get a quotation first to see if we even need to replace the floors or refinish the floors at the other 2 schools before we would put it in the budget. Because now we've taxed for it, and we don't need it for 4 or 5 years, right? So, but the other thing is I'm not in favor of ripping up a floor that's working perfectly fine and has worked well for the number of years the school has been here. And as you can see, this tile and the entire high school all has the same tile, and nobody has an issue with it. So I'm not in favor of ripping up a good floor for the purpose of ripping up a good floor. But,
I think one of the reasons too, and Tom can go along with this, is you can't hold tournaments in this gym anymore because of the flooring.
Well, I think that's probably the big question is, can somebody just kind of walk us through the condition of the gym floor?
Well, the gym floor is very similar to this floor. Are there any divots in the floor at this time? No. There aren't. I'm not going to disagree with Dan that it doesn't work well. I do get community members that talk, especially with the basketball leagues. On weekends, they play at the 2 other schools. They don't play here because it's so slick. Now, going back to what Mr. Jokic said, back in the days when Shannon brought that group of adults that would play nighttime basketball, they elected to go over to Fox River when the floors were changed. It's a tough floor for activities. Joel Befford, our FIAD teacher, likes it for the roller skating and the bowling. Other than that, though, he's hesitant with what the kids do on the floor.
and if the main purpose is only for basketball, it serves no purpose in ripping up a perfectly fine floor. That's the way I look at it. And the problem is, for example, high school doesn't have a hard rubberized floor in the big gym. Standard old wood floor that you varnish and put the lines on. Well, we went to the expensive one over here that cost us $11,000 or no more than that, $30,000. $30,000 refinish every 10 years, which is ridiculous. They're playing basketball on a standard floor that's been around for hundreds of years, right? Somehow we have to go to a rubberized one, and it's supposed to be a better floor, but yet they're WIAA, no issue. Playing around a standard In fact, it was just refinished. Repainted, refinished, and I think it cost $15,000 or something. $30.
Mr. Bedford's comment would be that there's no stopping in the floor. In other words, when he's doing an activity which the kids are running, for them to come to a stop, typically they slide on it. Again, it's this floor
Yep.
transferred over.
One thing I will say is that floor needs to be cleaned more often. I hear that from the folks in the rec department program.
And what we do to address that, our incoming procedure is the kids get off the bus and they line up in the gymnasium for the teachers to go down and gather them. Well, with the snowfalls and what have you, then we adjust our plans so the kids stay in the bus hallway, because getting it cleaned between that time and his first hour of class is very difficult to do.
Yeah. But the floor is impervious, and if a tile cracks, you just call up our local guy, he comes in, replaces the tile. They do it all the time all over the high school. It has been done for decades. And to mention, that's the only floor right now that you can hold something and that you are not worried about scratching the floor up, whereas all the other ones, any steel on those scratches those floors up. We pay tens of thousands of dollars to fix them. You scratch one tile with this, I just remove one tile, I reglue a new tile, and you're done. So, for example, Cub Scouts holding a Pinewood Derby or something, you don't have an issue on that floor.
So I mean, at the end of the day, it's a great floor for an auditorium, but not the best floor for a gymnasium.
Yep, it's all around, it's the only one we have right now where you can do general purpose without having a rubberized surface, and has the largest seating around.
By redoing the floor at 58-4, how long would we think that floor would last?
About 20 years. And I get that from, see, the floor at Fox River was redone, was it 12 years or 10?
Well, how many years have we been in the building? 14.
14.
14.
So
But it was
I think
done-
about 2 years after we went in there, so about
Okay.
12,
Right.
somewhere in that area.
And so that's why I built into the budget this year for Evergreen and for Trailside and Woodfield, because it was several years past Fox River's floor. And it was just on a maintenance cycle, list of things to do. But based on what they've said, what they told Mr. Quant earlier this calendar year, 15 to 20 years will be fine. And it's trending that way at Trailside and Woodfield.
I would be fine with replacing the floor, so it would be 1-1.
Yeah.
To move to the board.
So I'll move that to the board for a vote, and 1 for, 1 against.
Is there any benefit in, and I can get the information from Joel Bedford to present to the board either via email or prior to the vote, just what Joel's concerns are and what the benefit and what the disadvantages are of the current floor?
If you could, because if it comes down to safety factors for over half the gym classes, well then, yeah, we definitely have to do something.
I think he would know best, just
Yes.
out of respect for
If
him.
you could get that for us, I'd appreciate it.
All right, anything else for Kenneth? Okay.